At many centres in Britain, children between the ages of 2 and 9 are being inoculated with vaccine produced in this country.
For decades, we've been vaccinating children against viruses that, unchecked, could kill or make large numbers of our young seriously ill. After years of research, in 2013, we began giving them the flu vaccine, not just for their own benefit, but because vaccinating them helps prevent infection in the vulnerable old. Now we find ourselves grappling with a new dilemma. Should we vaccinate our children against COVID? And if we should, then what is the reason for doing so? For the age groups who are currently getting vaccinated, our scientific advice is that they are more likely to be made very sick from COVID than from the side effects of any of the vaccines. But because the young get so much less sick from COVID, the balance of any benefit versus any potential harm is different. We've already seen this play out with the question about which vaccine to give 18 to 30-year-olds. So the issue is quantifying the harm of COVID to children. According to the Office for National Statistics, 14 children under 15 have tragically lost their lives with COVID-19 being involved in their death. An ONS survey of self-reported symptoms also says 9.8% of 2 to 11-year-olds and 13% of 12 to 16-year-olds are continuing to experience symptoms 5 weeks after COVID. This is lower than for adults, but some who are treating children experiencing persistent symptoms say we need more reliable data than the ONS survey.
At the moment, thankfully, children are very unlikely to experience severe disease, whether that's typical severe pneumonia with COVID or whether that's the post-infectious inflammatory syndrome. And if we're going to make a big decision about vaccinating the entire population of children, I think we need more robust data, which is going to look at a much bigger group of children and will give us a better understanding of how much long COVID or persistent symptoms are affecting children after COVID.
Nobody wants to close schools again. Reducing transmission among children through vaccination could help to keep them open. And in Israel, where large swathes of the adult population are now vaccinated, some paediatricians cite the risk of mutations spreading as a reason to vaccinate children.
The disease might soar up again in children and might endanger even adults that were vaccinated with the previous versions of the virus. But first of all, the children themselves. So the situation is right now in Israel, as I say, it's a peculiar scene, but very unique to Israel after the very successful rollout of adult vaccination. But again, we should consider the possibility that COVID-19 is a tricky disease, and our duties as pediatricians is to protect children.
Steps to immunize the whole population, more than 300,000, were swiftly taken.
The polio vaccine has saved the lives of 1.5 million children, according to the World Health Organization. But COVID isn't polio, and some wonder if in fact the best form of protection may come not from vaccines, but from naturally acquired infection, and that for those who are at low risk, it could be a sensible policy.
As variants arise, our immune system is more able to have maybe not the strongest response, but enough of a response to prevent severe disease against a variant that's a bit different. Whereas vaccine-induced immunity, the variant might be able to escape that vaccine-induced immunity entirely. So it may be beneficial both from an individual level of reducing disease upon subsequent exposure with a variant, as well as from a population level of maintaining this kind of boosting of immunity by just natural exposure to mild infection.
It mightn't feel it in the UK right now, but global vaccine supplies are limited. Whether we should be vaccinating our young before others far more vulnerable elsewhere are protected is an ongoing debate. But even putting that to one side, there is a question of how our vaccine committee, the JCVI, best deploy vaccines within our borders.
If we get to the autumn and we are seeing from the studies that are being done and from the studies we're going to do over the summer that we need to give a booster to older adults or to specific groups of people, then we're only going to have a certain amount of Pfizer vaccine to use in the UK because of global vaccine supply. And JCVI are going to have to decide where best to use it. And it might be not the teenagers if the pressure is on using it as a booster in the older people.
Repeated studies have shown how children spread COVID less than adults, but they do still spread it. So what about vaccinating them to protect transmission?
Certainly for children under 10, unlike with flu, children don't appear to transmit and be big drivers for transmission the way they are for flu. It may be that we start to vaccinate adolescents first, and that balance of benefit will come for the adolescents before it would come for primary age children.
The decision about whether to vaccinate our children or not likely won't only be about them. They may be offered or indeed denied the vaccine in the interests of wider society. To some, that's simply common sense, but to others, we need to start thinking about what's best for children.
Children have taken an enormous hit in terms of the impacts on their life, which don't give them necessarily a direct benefit over the last year, through loss of routine, through loss of school, through loss of all the things that they normally do. And it's really important at the moment that we start to put children first.
Our young have missed out on so much over the past 13 months. If we are to vaccinate them against COVID, we'll need to be clear why we are doing so. For now, no decision has been taken.